the first question, and this is for Brian. What background and skills do you have that will enable the City Council to function more effectively and in the community's best interest?
Well, I have spent over a quarter of my life living outside of this country and in socialist governments. I've spent most of my life in areas where I've lived in a diverse population with different ideals, different ideologies, different thoughts, and it has helped me to learn to help or to understand others' needs, be considerate of those needs, their rights, and I've learned that much like a good stew, that individual pieces may be delicious, but when combined together, a delicious soup can be made. It doesn't have to be that we're disagreeable or opposed to each other, but we can work together in tandem to accomplish many great things. I believe it's possible to disagree without being disagreeable, and when we do so, we're stronger. We can embrace each other's viewpoints and make better decisions together.
Thank you, Brian. John, do you need to have the question repeated?
No. Most of my life was spent as actually a labor organizer and representative. Most of my career involved problem solving and dispute resolution with groups and individuals. As a trained mediator, I trained other mediators. I researched, wrote, and negotiated collective bargaining agreements, and pretty much studied some administrative law and decision and how they affect dispute resolution. I've also handled multiple personnel issues such as contracting out, discipline, the whole realm of pay issues. So that's basically my background, and I think working in groups and reaching resolutions was a strong suit of mine, and I think it would serve me well in working for the council.
Thank you, John. Lisa. Kelly.
I grew up here in Alberta and spent most of my life here. There's maybe a few years that we lived in Wyoming, but the rest of the time my family and I, my wife and I, with our family, have lived here in Alberta. And this is a community that means a lot to me, and I want to hopefully make this the best community that we can. My background is that most of my working years have been in the waterworks industry, and so I understand water and sewer systems, and I've worked with most of the communities in southern Utah with their water and sewer systems that they have, and so I have the expertise to be able to help the community in that area, and have had opportunity to work with a lot of the individuals that run those systems in each one of those towns and cities here in southern Utah. So I understand the problems and the difficulties that a community has with those types of issues. And I think with the background that I have, I can be an asset to this community.
Thank you, Kelly. Chuck?
I'm Chuck Hardy. I grew up here in Alberta as well. I did too. For the past 34 years, I've been an educator in Washington County School District. So I've seen the growth that has occurred and seen many of our youth come through and ninth grade, middle ages, and the science teacher. I think that has taught me very much how to adjust and adapt, how to become better prepared to learn and to grow. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. So, and that goes for all of us here. We have, you look up here and you can see we have some excellent choices for our city council. And from my perspective, from where I sit, I think any one of us will be good choices for our city council. And so it's a tough decision. The point is, get out and vote. Please be sure you talk to your friends and neighbors and get out and vote. If I'm elected, I hope that I have plenty to offer the city council. I have been on the planning commission as well, and so I am familiar with city works.
Micah?
First, I'd like to thank Mary and Victor for putting this together, the time that it took. As I thought about this question, 4 years ago when I ran, I rattled off, I've lived in Laverton my entire life. A business owner, an employer, tools with budgets and so forth that I thought would help me. But honestly, this time around, and I didn't anticipate running again, but I think what makes me the most qualified, more qualified now than I was before, was just the last 4 years. City council's been different from any other experience. It's tough to get things done, and it takes a while to get a grasp of the budget and the workings of the planning commission with the city council. And so after putting in that time, I feel like I'm finally to a point where maybe I could do some good and see some changes and some other things happen that would just continue the great city that we live in. So, I would put that as number one. Number two, I love working in councils. I've had experience of working in councils with men and women of different backgrounds and experience. And I think I work well with a group and try to find a consensus in finding a vision.
Thank you, Micah. Okay, second question, and we'll start again with Ryan. If elected, you would be asked to respond to complaints by citizens. What 2 to 3 issues are you aware of that need to be addressed, and what would be your solutions to those issues?
Well, I think city challenges are an aging infrastructure. Past city council meetings have addressed irrigation water and the way forward in repairing that and getting that up to maintaining that so that it doesn't fail in regular maintenance. I think economic development is another issue facing the city, as well as tourist industry. It's said that about 4 million people pass through Laverton on their way up to Zion National Park every year. And as a part of economic development, many of their dollars don't stop here, they continue on. And I think as a council, it would be wise for us to retain some of those dollars, have some stickiness to where tourists would remain in the city and spend some money so as that the burden on taxpayers, the local citizens, has been lessened.
Thank you, Brian. John?
Since my arrival here, I tended to attend most city council meetings, and one of the things I thought was interesting is there were 3 issues that did kind of tend to be discussed more than others. The first, of course, was roads, and it tends to be a particular issue of comment on the social media and other places. The problem with roads is the road budget here is about $380,000 or $90,000. $240,000 goes to repairs and resurfacing, and about $100,000 to salaries. So there's really not a lot of room there to do major projects. And I think unless there's some kind of bonding or savings to work on the bigger projects, that issue won't get accomplished. The second issue tends to be salaries, which take up an inordinate amount of the budget, about $2 million out of a little bit more than $4 million combined budget, being the general fund and all the additional funds. I know there was an issue recently about police, and there was discussion about whether or not we moved too quickly to a sizable force, but it seems like the budget has grown enough that that's been kind of an issue that's tended to be repaired, and I won't get to discuss the third one.
You have 15 seconds.
Oh,
Go fast.
the third one would be vacation rentals, and of course, I think the town council tended to make too many adjustments in it, and it pretty much, caused more problems than resolutions.
Thank you, John. Kelly?
A couple of complaints that I've heard. First, I don't have a paved road in front of my house, and I was hoping the city would pave that road. And there are a couple of places in the community where I would like to see that happen as well. But it all takes a lot of money to do that. And right now we are working on a project that would probably pave those roads and upgrade some of the water system that needs to be upgraded in the community. And we're just trying to make sure that we have the funds to do that, and we don't put the city in bondage to the point to where we can't pay for it. So we're working on that right now. The other one I hear quite often, and it comes from my wife a lot of the times, is people don't take care of the yards. And or my neighbor's yard's a mess, and I wish the city would do something to make them clean it up. And that's a tough issue to deal with. And code enforcement, you can cite them and take them to court, and it just all costs money. And I would just hope that the citizens of the community would take care of the places and make this a better place.
Thank you, Kelly. Chuck?
Wow, it's a big topic. Let's just skip that and get right to it. I think the two or three that I would think are important are, I've heard a lot of citizens talk about and ask about, concerned about the rental properties and having them too many in the community. I think that needs to be addressed. The roads is another issue. And recently I attended a meeting with a member of the commission, but they've got a pretty good handle on the roads in the whole Washington County area. And so maybe roads aren't as big an issue as I originally thought. And police force was one, keeping our community safe. And I don't know that we can actually propose that the question asked us to, what are our solutions? I don't know yet. We've got to understand our infrastructure and what our budgetary measures are and so forth before we can really solve those. So, sorry, I don't have an answer for you on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Micah?
I think it all depends on the circles that you run in, what the major concerns are for the city. I've had individuals tell me that our police force isn't big enough. I've had individuals tell me that we don't even need one. Some that want the roads paved, and others that say that dirt road's just fine. I don't want any more money going towards it. So a lot of it is perspective. I do think vacation rentals, like was mentioned before, that's come before the city council with more intensity and more interest, I think, over the past couple of years. Another one that hasn't been mentioned is the city being, the city and some of our codes being a little bit cumbersome and difficult to work with. Some builders and developers and so forth bypassing Lavergan because they'd rather work with other communities that seem to be a little bit easier to work with. Too much red tape, it's too difficult to get some things done. So anyway, there's answers to all of those. The answers aren't easy. And that's, again, that goes back to working on a city council. It's difficult to find the perfect solution, but there are better answers to those, and I think we can find those.
Thank you, Micah. Okay, we're going to shake it up a little bit. We're going to start with Chuck on this one. Chuck, do you feel there are any city budgetary priorities or expenditure issues that should be brought before the council?
Budget's always a tough one because the city needs money to spend. And it's got to come from us, not you, us, all of us. And unless we can tap into other sources, grants and things of this nature where money is available. And I think the city is looking at those things as well. Budget issues. I don't believe in taxes. I think I need to restate that. I feel like we are taxed enough. And the county wants our money, the state wants our money, the federal government, and the city. And I think that we need to look for other more creative ways to fund things. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm a no tax kind of person. I think we're taxed enough, and that's as far as we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Kelly?
One of the budgetary priorities that I think, and probably will come before the council fairly soon, is that the water upgrade that we're looking at and the street upgrades. There's 2 or 3 streets that really need some attention to them, and so those are priorities that I think are in the near future for Laverca. And as far as the money to do that, we do have some resources coming in. As all of you know that are here, there was a water rate increase last year, about a year ago. And the purpose of that was to upgrade our system and get ahead of it. The city was falling behind. We didn't have the money to even maintain the system without borrowing from the general budget. So that's been corrected, and we'll be able to look at that at the end of the year and just see where we are at and what we can do with what funds are available to the community. And we're going to try to maximize what we can with those monies to get the biggest bang for our buck.
Thank you, Kelly. Brian?
Being a regular attender of city council and having just recently gone through the approval of the budget for the city, I feel that the current council is very fiscally minded and very concerned with how they spend money. We are facing some issues with the infrastructure, roads and water that need to be addressed, and as was mentioned, there's been an increase and there's going to be more increases on the way. And part of the council, their decision to increase incrementally as opposed to all in one big jump, I think it was wise to help the citizens not go into shock. But as Mr. Reeves mentioned, we are behind and trying to catch up so that we can maintain the water system appropriately. But all in all, I think the council is very wise in their allocation of the funds that they receive.
Thank you, Brian. Micah?
The budget, there are always more needs and projects than we have money. That's the frustrating thing, and most of us can probably relate to that, with our own budget within our home. I would echo what's been said, the roads and the water are at the top for me. And water may not seem like an issue, but as soon as we aren't able to deliver water to your home or to my home, then it becomes a crisis. And so we want to make sure that we're not reacting to a crisis, but that we're looking ahead on that. We'd like to make some progress on the roads. It feels like we're just barely maintaining on the roads, and we're trying to free up more money. It is always a juggling act. As Mr. Valenti shared as well, there's a lot of expenses that go into the city employees, to payrolls, to benefits and so forth, but our employees are a critical part of the assets we have for the city. I think we have great employees, and I applaud our city management and the employees and prior or previous city councils. We're in a good position fiscally. And so it gives us some more flexibility to do some of these projects and try to get ahead.
Thank you, Micah. And John?
Again, the budget discussions are interesting. They start probably sometime very early in the year. As working groups, I attended this year, and it was kind of interesting. I think it was the only one that was attending. But to see people wrestle through the budget is interesting to watch, and there are a lot of give and take. But for a private citizen, there's not the opportunity to ask questions, to really dig into the reasoning that particular pieces of the budget are decided on one way or the other. I guess unless you're part of the council, you'll never see that part to be able to ask those types of questions. There are issues like vacation rentals that are a two-edged sword. The more vacation rentals we have, the more monies we get in taxes. But the problem is then they are detrimental to some people's view of the community. There are bonds that we've looked at. I know this year the council has looked at retiring bonds, and to simply retire a bond or a previous debt puts that much more money into the budget that could be reused and some other demand. So it's often beneficial to pay down debt if we can, to free up those dollars to use in maybe rebonding at some future time. But again, each department has its own need, and those are the types of discussions that go on routinely on budgets.
Thank you, John. Kelly, we're going to start with you on this one. This is question number 4. In your opinion, what is an elected official's role in economic development? And what ideas do you have to increase revenue for the city without raising taxes?
I think as far as a city council, we have a big part in playing in trying to increase economic development here in the community. One of the things we're currently trying to do is we have people interested in developing the hot springs. And the water district doesn't want anybody down in the canyon, but we have worked out an agreement with them that they're willing to pipe the water up onto the bench, and there's some parties that are interested in putting in a hot springs resort here in this community, which would be a huge benefit to the community. We have, as has been mentioned, 4 or 5 million people that drive through our community to get to the park. And that would be something that would, where they could stop and spend their dollars here in our community, and we could, it would be a benefit for our budget. And with something like that would make it to where we wouldn't maybe have to raise taxes, and hopefully we don't. That's one of the things that I would certainly don't want to do. And that issue came up this year, and we didn't act on it, and hope we don't have to.
Thank you. Brian?
So as a council member, it's incumbent upon me to listen to citizens and their concerns and what they would like heard and addressed with the council. Again, economic development, I think we have lots of money flowing past our community, and as was mentioned, the proposed resort up on the bench could be a boon to the tax revenues, lessening the burdens of the citizens of the community, giving tourists a reason to be here. We have great establishments within the city that are tourist frequent, restaurants, grocery store, gas stations. We need to, I think, develop those a little bit better and give tourists a reason to stay here and leave some of their money behind as opposed to taxing the citizens.
Thank you, Brian. John?
Economic development in two pieces basically is, how we're going to attract businesses here, and there are some direct means. Some people prefer to give tax breaks or incentives. Other people look at improvements, infrastructure improvements, street improvements, appearance improvements. Some folks will even go so far as to have routine sessions or councils with businesses to see what their thinking is and what we can do to benefit them in a greater way and try to pull those businesses in. The other part of the question in revenue generation is more one of, how much desire the town has and what assets it's willing to either sell or utilize in a sharing arrangement. For example, we have Confluence Park, and it's very underutilized. Maybe there could be some events held down there, sales events or bands, or something like that to generate ticket sales. It's probably one of the most underused places in town. Years ago, towns like Hurricane decided to generate power and ended up at some point taking up half of its revenue that the town makes now. I think it's somewhere around $15 million. So it's as much as the town wants to dream, as big as it wants to dream and invest in its future, that's where they'll generate that.
Thank you, John. Micah?
Economic development. Our State Street, the city's worked hard to do things with those buildings where prior businesses went in and tried to make it in the Merkin. We still have a few of those ghost buildings still up. If you look at the businesses that are able to make it in the Merkin are those that are associated with tourism or those that have to do with manufacturing. We don't have a place to put a lot of manufacturing, so tourism really is our best option. I know that our code right now has a lot of spots where only retail can go in or designated for retail. Hurricane struggles to have retail survive even in Hurricane. So I think we'd have to decide as a city how much do we want to develop towards tourism. As far as generating revenue, the one thing that I think would make the biggest difference for us would be our greatest asset is where we live. We're in one of the most beautiful parts of the country and parts of the world. And we have a wonderful community that's quiet and that people love to visit. So as we develop new neighborhoods where homes can go in, that families can live in, that will generate more additional tax income to the city just by virtue of having more homeowners there. So I would like to see some thoughtful development into some good neighborhoods go in, and it wouldn't impact us negatively.
Thank you, Micah. Chuck?
I also agree on the revenue. Rather than taxes, we need to bring in businesses. We need to find the right businesses that will complement our little town of La Merkin, because our area, our city area is pretty small. There's not a lot of room for expansion. So we need the right businesses. And I agree with Micah, there's a lot of connection to tourism that come through here. They have to come through here. So why not have them stop and deal with our businesses that are here, restaurants and hotels and things. So I think that's one of our best options.
Thank you. Question number 5. John, what is your vision for public safety and code enforcement in the Merkin?
Public safety is, police, but it's also, things like disaster preparedness, ham radio, people talking about the best way to monitor situations, getting people onto the systems that give alerts, AMR alerts and such. So it's kind of a mixed situation. I think the city can assist general public safety by making resources available to public and private groups to help educate the citizens about what's available to them insofar as securing their own personal safety. On the issue of code enforcement, again, I think it's, how well our codes are written. And I think they need to be looked at, and there's got to be some kind of prioritization. You can't go after everything. You're going to have to look at, what are the major nuisances or issues you really want to look at, and then, if you don't enforce those codes that you write, the codes become fairly useless. So that, one thing kind of feeds the other.
Thank you. Micah?
24-hour coverage is my vision. For the last year and a half to 2 years, that's been my assignment on the city council as public safety. And I've worked with Chief Lee. I know it's his goal. He wishes we were further along in it. He has a lot of excitement for his department, and we're grateful to have him. Again, as we talk about budgets, it's very difficult. We're not to 24-hour coverage, but in the back of my mind, it's always there. If there were an event, an emergency, an active shooter, whatever it might be, if it were during a time where we're committing money for a police force, but yet someone made that urgent call and we didn't have anyone here on duty at the time to take it. So 24-hour coverage, which would be at least one officer on 24 hours a day, and we're close to that. I think we're just probably a hire away from being there, and we're doing the best that we can with the resources that we have. Code enforcement is difficult. Every time that we focus on it a little bit more, we get upset residents that come in that have been cited. It's a difficult thing. I agree with John. We probably do need to clarify it a little bit more, but it is frustrating to have code, but then to see someone right next to us or across the street not keeping up with code. So we need to find an answer. It's not an easy answer.
Brian?
The police department's made great strides in the last, I would say, year. In at least maybe in the last 2 years, they've made great strides. But there was a time when citizens would say that, it's after 10 o'clock and that's when the police are gone and lots of things are happening in the community. And I've noticed that in the last year or so, things have calmed down and are not quite as wild west as they once were. And I'm grateful for that. A large part of the city's budget is spent on policing, and there's a constraint there. And again, weighing how do you spend money that could go towards roads or water and put it towards police. So policing is a big concern. Code enforcement is another concern that I don't know. It's just a matter of having someone being able to enforce the code, whatever code that might be, and to do it consistently and regularly, so that one knows that if this is going to happen, that you're going to be cited, and to make it so that it hurts and it's not just a cheap ticket.
Thank you. Kelly?
I guess public safety, the first thing I would say is I appreciate what our police department does. Really, I think a lot of our chief, he's always trying to make the police department a better department for the community, even beyond what the budget is. So But I don't fault him for that, because I think he's just trying to make this a better community for all of us. And my hope is that we could get to the 24-hour coverage and soon, but it costs money. And so we have to find ways to be able to fund the extra officers that we need. And we're always looking for that, and we got a police chief that's always looking for extra money for us so that he can do that. And I do appreciate the work that they do. I see the reports every month, and they're busy. There's a lot of things that they take care of in this community that many of us are not aware of. And as far as code enforcement, that's, as mentioned, that's a difficult one. That takes money as well to do that, and it gets people upset. I would just hope that there was a way that we could work together with our neighbors and help them realize that it's good to clean up around your community, your yard and the community.
Thank you, Kelly. This will be my last question before the audience can come up and ask questions. So Micah, I'm going to start with you. If there was one thing you could change about La Verkin, what would it be?
This is what I ran 4 years ago, and I think it's what I feel the most strongly about. There are a lot, La Verkin is a great place to start your family or to start as a homeowner, and I see a lot of wonderful individuals that move here, and eventually they move away, and I wonder why. And a lot of times it has to do with maybe they've started a family, they've outgrown the starter home that they bought, and they look at neighboring communities and just see greener pastures there. And it seems like we're always resetting in our neighborhoods. We have these wonderful neighbors we get to know and enjoy, and then they move on, and then we start over again. I think our community strengthened as we have individuals that come here and put down roots. And so I would like to see La Verkin be able to offer more along those lines. And I think it's a comprehensive thing. Our public safety, our roads, as we have neighborhoods where they can build a home to accommodate their families. We take care of our yards. All of these things come and come together. Even the trail system that's being worked on, and our parks. It all comes together to create a place to where these individuals will come and they'll want to stay. And that's what I'd like to see, is La Verkin to become a permanent place for them.
Thank you, Micah. Chuck?
Well, having grown up here, seeing a lot of changes, I guess I'd like to see La Verkin stay small, but I don't think that's a possibility. And so we've got to roll with the growth. We've got to have that growth. We just need to develop it. So I would say continue. Change something, I don't know, but continue with the good things that are happening. The city is really developing. They're coming along, and they're controlling a lot of the growth issues and things. I think that they're doing a great job with our community. Perhaps we could develop and unite with the trail and the hiking and the biking and the recreational things that are already in place, but develop them a little better. Maybe we need a few more trails along the side of the hill. Maybe we need more businesses that will cater to the people that like to hike and bike and draw them in, and then that will lead to restaurants that you got to feed those people and so forth. So these are issues that perhaps we can actually go out and look for the right kinds of businesses and try to draw them in to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly?
I guess maybe the one thing I would like to see change in La Verkin is those that don't take pride in the yards and cleaning up after themselves. I don't know how you get people to do that. I'm not saying that they're bad people, that some of them might be your neighbors and they're really good people. And maybe we just need to approach it in a way that we help each other out. Nobody likes to get a ticket because they are not doing what their neighbors want them to do. And I would just, I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I would hope that we can take a little more pride in the community and make it look better and nicer so that it looks good for everybody. And that's probably just the one thing that I hope that would happen.
Thank you, Kelly. John?
One thing I'd like to see, and I'm kind of impressed tonight, that this is probably the most people I've seen at the meeting in quite some time. And, you know, the things I'd like to see change is that this many people show up for kind of regular meetings and be able to voice their opinions. I think, you know, there may be some things we could do to help that along. I think that, you know, some of the council rules sometimes seem to be a little cumbersome where, you know, citizens come in to give comment and they're put on a, you know, maybe a 2-minute time for just about anybody who wants to speak to an issue. There's really not any engaging in discussion with council members directly or a give and take. And I think that would help. I think it'd educate the council as to the needs of the public and the desires of the public. I think part of that could be when the agendas are put out, documents that are going to be discussed could be attached to those agendas, and people could look at them and kind of form some thoughts before they come to the meetings. And lastly, I you know, in experiencing, you know, or seeing what's going on in Hurricane with this rec center, the town may be looking at a $25 million bond. I think it might be nice for the citizens to have some form of referendum, either citizen-driven or in response to any kind of action that the council takes to either overturn it or bring in the individual opinion of the citizenry.
Thank you, John. And Brian?
Lubercan has a proud past, and it does have a promising future, but there's some challenges and opportunities for us to figure out how to tackle those opportunities and how to incorporate them into this beautiful valley. And I think one of those is affordable housing. That's a problem throughout the county. People tend to migrate away from St. George because housing's a little more affordable in Hurricane and Lubercan and Tokerville. But oftentimes for first-time home buyers, they desire to purchase a home, but they can't for any number of reasons. But I think that's probably one thing that I would change is giving individuals the opportunity to purchase a home and set down roots and become a part of this community.
Thank you, Brian. The audience now has an opportunity to come up and ask questions. You can come up to this mic here. If I could see a show of hands for anyone who has a question to any of the candidates or all of the candidates. We have 20 minutes. Adrian?
Well, I have a question about the public safety plans and policies. I am quite concerned because we have this revolving police department. We get new policemen and they're super, and we train them, and then they move to another place that pays them a lot more money. And I would like to hear from each of you if you have a solution to that problem.
Brian, you want to start?
Not really, but
Not
I will.
really? Okay. Micah, you want to?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay, go ahead, Micah.
Okay. Right now, with the budget that we have, we would have to either decide, okay, we're cutting down to 2 full-time employees and pay them that wage to keep them from leaving instead of having 4 full-time with some part-time. Or we have to continue to try to make the best of it, which we can. I feel for Chief Lee. as a business owner, one of the hardest things to do is to train. And as soon as you get them trained to see them leave, you got to start over again. But that's the reality of where we're at. It is the major portion, I think, of our budget right now. We've grown it the most out of every other portion of our budget over the past couple of years. So we're working on it, we're making strides. I don't think there's a quick solution to that. I don't think we can snap our fingers and say, okay, we can pay you exactly what you want and keep the goal of trying to get enough officers so we have someone patrolling. So, tough decision. I think what we'd say right now is the course we've taken is to do the best that we can, trying to make it work and retain the ones that we have.
Anyone else like to respond to David's question?
Sure.
Go ahead, Brian.
I think, like Mike said, that's a problem throughout any business, any corporation, any entity, is you train people up and then they leave. Greener pastures, more money. And so I think, again, it's back to attracting people that want to be here, giving them a reason to be here, affordable housing, the park, the trails, to be amongst friends and possibly family. And when you can do that and they have a desire to be here, then they'll stay. And if they can take care of their family, which is every individual's desire and dream, is to be able to take care of their family, to have them safe, and to enjoy your neighborhood and your community. How do you do that? That's where the challenge is, and that's where, as a council, that nut needs to be cracked and figure out how to do that, where you can have 24-hour coverage. We're kind of in a difficult spot where not quite enough money, but again, it's a challenge that as a council, they need to answer that tough question.
Thank you. One more.
In reviewing policing in the area, quite a while ago, for example, Leeds has no police. Tokerville has no police. Virgin has no police. Many of the towns around us don't have significant enough budget to have their own force. We're kind of at that point now where we're in between some of the larger cities that can afford it, and we really can't. And I think that's where the rub comes in. There are other towns in the county, like Ivins and Santa Clara, that have combined to have a joint police force. And, at some point in the future, I can see that this might happen in this general area. Maybe like Salt Lake, a unified system where towns become precincted and have, buildings that house the officers for the town, but that the main force is kind of combined in one centralized area. If we don't go to that, we're going to continue to struggle, and it's going to continue to be a significant portion of our budget. We may be able to outgrow it by growing revenue and being able to afford it. I don't, fault Chief Lee. It's a tough job to do. It's it's almost impossible to compete in the budget that we have, but that's where we're at.
Okay. We're going to go on to another question. Rich, show of hand that anyone that would like to come up and ask questions? Oh, really? No one else has a question? Yes, please come up.
My question to all of you is, I was kind of shocked when the water went up about $14. And I didn't understand, because I hadn't been to a city council to know that infrastructure was where it was needed. But I've heard a rumor about metering our irrigation water, and I'm concerned about that. Is that something that is going to be in the future? Kelly?
Kelly can speak to that.
This is something that the state legislature has been proposing. In fact, when I got on the council a couple of years ago, it was when I first heard about it, I thought, that's a crazy thing. And so we have been talking to the state legislature, telling them that it's not a good thing to do, to meter the irrigation water in these pressurized systems, especially for the small communities. And they're pretty dead set on doing it. And so over the past year, we've been able to attend some of the meetings. The proposal was to meter this last year by the legislature, and then they decided to kick it to the Water Task Force. And so the Water Task Force has had that in their on their agenda for ever since April. And I've attended all but one of those Water Task Force meetings, and they just didn't seem to want to bring it up. And each time I'd bring it up at the end of their meeting and ask them when they're going to deal with this. They finally did. If I could take a little bit more time, I'll explain the rest of it. They finally did bring it up, and they put a committee together, and there's 3 communities in southern Utah that are on that committee. The rest are from up north. And we met last week on October 1st and laid out all the issues that everybody had, all the problems with that, and everybody there was against it. And we're going to meet one more time and organize all those things together, and not just have the pros, but the cons about it, and then present it to the Water Task Force, and they'll in turn present it back to the legislature. And hopefully they will let these smaller communities go without metering, because the cost to do it would put secondary water to where our culinary water is, or maybe even higher. And we tell them nobody would want to irrigate with dirty river water when they can do it with clean culinary water if it costs the same.
Well, thank you. But I also, why do they have a say in what we do with our own water here in La Verkin?
Because the state owns all the water,
All the water.
and we just have rights to it. And the whole issue is that they're projecting that Utah will double population by 2065. And so they're looking for all kinds of ways to conserve water, to find extra resources for water, and they believe that by metering secondary irrigation, people will use less, and so they'll be able to extend the use of that water out.
Well, and I also heard that if we don't use our water, we lose our water. Is that correct?
Well, as long as the city owns the water and has it for future use, it's hard to take it away from us.
So if you own irrigation water and we're paying for that, and the city is regulating that now, right?
They are,
And we pay into that, those of us that have shares.
yes.
So if they're going to meter our water, I mean, if that happens to come about, wouldn't it be better for us to have the city take that water over?
The city already does.
Okay, so they're doing
You
that.
just have the right to use it.
Okay. And so I'm paying double, right?
No, you're not being done.
It seems like it.
You will be paying more than double if they meter the water.
Okay, thanks.
So we hope that that doesn't happen, and we're working as hard as we can to keep that from happening.
Nobody answered the question about the culinary water going up.
What,
The question was about why it went up so much.
I thought the answer was so that we could get on top of the
Infrastructure.
system.
And so that's
and
the water
infrastructure.
system in the town you're talking about?
Yes.
That's the
Not
culinary
irrigation.
water.
That was the culinary water,
Those rates hadn't been changed for 20 years.
Yeah.
close to that, yeah.
Yeah, they had held steady for 20 years. We were just behind.
Any other questions? We have 5 more minutes. Question?
Can I just ask this?
Sure.
How many homes are you
many homes? I believe
Is it
1,500.
1,500?
It's close to that, yeah.
How many?
So,
There are 1,400 water connections.
1,400
Residential
water connections.
1,400?
1,400 water
Roughly.
connections.
So how many?
About 4,600?
Population's about 4,600.
Don't ask me how I know that.
I actually have one more question, I'm sorry. I don't know how many police officers we actually have in Laverne. How many do we have?
you've
Chief,
got five,
Chief
right?
Lee?
Five.
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 Full-time?
5 full-time police officers.
And we can't cover it with that? Five?
Well, some need to sleep and some need to take a vacation.
Okay.
Well, and Chief addresses this in some of the city council meetings, the struggle. If they're called out, they may be off, but they may be called out, and so it cuts into what they're scheduled later on, because we can only work them 40 hours a week, and so it's difficult
So
to.
what percent of the tickets do they get? When they write a ticket, do they get the money? Does the city get the money?
Are you saying the city? Okay, and Chief, if you better answer that. We don't know. They personally don't get any of it.
No, city.
It's a percentage that goes into the general fund, but it's not a very high percentage at all.
It surprised me when we read through it and I saw the number, it was a lot lower than I thought it would be.
A lot of it's because we go through the hurricane court, and they retain that.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Then we're going to go to closing statement. And if you could please include, if elected, what would you like to accomplish specifically as a city council member? You'll have 1 minute. Brian?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Marion Bixer and each of you for being here, taking the time out of your busy schedules to be a part of the city council. What I'd like to accomplish is keeping be mindful of our proud past, looking to the future and the promises and the bright future that we have, and working together with the council in the challenges that the city faces, to help each of us have a place where we feel able to raise a family, exercise our rights as citizens of this great nation and this great city.
Thank you, Brian. John?
Again, I'd like to accomplish, getting more people to come, getting greater representation of the community, and assisting the council and really doing the will of the people. This is what this council is for. It's not the council's determination of what's going to be done. It's the citizens that will help to bring the issues forward that'll be resolved. The council can work on those, but if you're just going to let the council have its own idea of what the city is, that's not going to get us very far. I'd really like to see more participation. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, I too appreciate you putting this together and all those that have been involved in it. What I'd like to see happen is that we don't need a secondary irrigation, and then we can talk the state out of that. It would be a real detriment to this community, and I would like to see the water system upgraded, something we're working on now, and some of the streets repaired and upgraded as well. And those are things that we've been working on for the last couple of years. I would hope to see those through. So, and as mentioned, we represent you. And if you have things you want to bring up, all of the city council members are open to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Kelly. Chuck?
Well, thank you all for coming. If I were to mention one thing, it would be when all the voting's done, I hope that all of us will join hands and just work together And that advice comes from a Disney movie called The Family Man. I encourage y'all to watch it. It's an enjoyable movie and it has a powerful message. But if you were to elect me, I would hope to see lost my train of thought. I guess what I really want to say is I hope to continue working with our youth. And so I would encourage you to vote for these gentlemen this time around so that I can spend time with our youth and be involved with them. But if you did elect me, I would want to see our community capitalize on bringing in the right kind of businesses and the right kind of monies that will help us to fund what we need, but complement our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Right now.
If elected, it's going to sound like a letter to Santa, a wish list. But we've talked about all of it. I would really love to see us in the next 4 years get to 24-hour coverage with and that's making Chief Lee cringe because he's open within 6 months or a year. But it'll take some work. But the roads, we have roads that desperately are high on our priority list, and the infrastructure, all of these things. I would like to see us make a lot of headway with that. And it's going to be a juggling and a balancing act to be able to do that. But I'm excited to have the opportunity to hopefully give that a shot. Like I mentioned before, if elected again, I'll only serve for 4 years, which would be 4 years longer than I thought I would going in. But I'm excited about where Lubricant's headed, and I would give all my energy to try to make this work.
Thank you. Mayor, I'll go ahead and announce we're going to have a closing song, God Bless America. So if Adrian and Susan will please come up. And then Pastor Jason McDowell from Mountain View Bible Church will do our closing prayer. And then Mayor Hershey will excuse us.
Before we sing this song, my husband had printed out a little notation about what this song was written for. It says it was first written by Irving Berlin in 1918. He rewrote the song in 1938 in response to the rise of Adolf Hitler and fascism in Germany. He rewrote it as a prayer for peace, and it was performed for the first time by Kate Smith on an Armistice Day broadcast November 11th, which is now known as Veterans Day of that year. Berlin also wrote the spoken introduction, now rarely heard. And at its heart, it's a prayer for the well-being of our country, especially in the politically and racially charged times in which we live. May God bless America. It truly belongs to all of us together.
Let's
I think everybody here ought to join the choir.
Jason? Let me come over on this side.
That's fine, sure.
Face the-
All right, let's pray together again this evening. God in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity just to hear different voices, both from the citizens here in La Verkin and from those who are running for city council this time around. And God, we just want to ask, first of all, that you would step in and do things that we as people are incapable of. And so, as far as the safety and preparedness for that of our city is concerned, that you would put your protection over us, God, and prevent certain things that would really stress our police force in the present state that it is until it can grow more especially, but just protect us as a city. We also pray that you would open up doors of opportunity, draw more people in, create opportunities for businesses and other sources of revenue to come in, have people even approach us in the leadership of this city. We also pray for insight for everyone who will serve as part of the city council and for the citizens of this city in general. Give us the wisdom and the insight that we need to ask the right questions and to see the right course of action when there are many choices and many options. And we pray for wisdom in the upcoming elections as well to choose not only people who are capable, but who will be right for this point in time in history in La Verkin. And we ask your guidance on that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Congratulations.